the title, and thanks. Yeah, this paper is a helicopter view, and I've split it into four because we are looking at the origins, the fairly recent origins of this Heritage Foundation and how we are going forward now. I've got to say that the big questions we get are all on these points, the first session. So we are often asked, or I am certainly, what are you and what have you got and where is it up to? That's what this particular bit is about. Australia now has, in the centre of motoring enthusiasm in Sydney, its own independent hub for motoring knowledge, research, education, and for supporter clubs. I like to think about it as the pivot point between past practice and future expectation. It's been 10 years in the growing, and a lot of people are involved. And it's only just come into its own in the sense of coming into daylight. It is the Australian Motor Heritage Foundation, or AMHF. It's a registered charity, it's a corporate. It's been serving the broad community since its incorporation in November 2016. It's a going concern with a permanent home and an independent way of life. This is the home base, the building. The six founders had spent the previous 5 years prior to 2016 investigating the ways and means both at home and overseas for pulling the trigger in 2016, which we did. We got letters of support in November 2016, notably from the HSRCA, the Historic Sports and Racing Cars Association, from the ARDC, the Australian Racing Drivers Club, and the Council of Motor Clubs, New South Wales. Those were, of course, New South Wales entities. We're all in New South Wales, and I'm sitting in Mossman on Camaragal People's property. Our first strategic partner was the ARDC, which is the operator of Sydney Motorsport Park. We've got a long-term sublease of the ARDC's prominent old admin building near the grandstand. This is near the new Western Sydney International Airport, close to the city of Penrith and the demographic centre of Greater Sydney as a consequence. Here we are. You can see the AMHF designated in red about the centre of the slide. You get to it by basically entering the old back entrance, main entrance as it used to be to Sydney Motorsport Park, and the building is on the land near the road, but behind the grandstand and on Sydney Motorsport Park, part of the area leased by the ARDC there. The AMHF was incorporated as a not-for-profit public company, limited by guarantee. The 10 members currently, that's it. We're not looking at increasing the number anymore until the board and the members resolve. Only the members can nominate to serve on the board of directors. Only they control the affairs of the company. It has no share capital. It cannot be taken over, cannot raise money secured by mortgage. These things are essential for its charitable status. And so, like every true and permanent foundation, and we've got a 20-25 year time frame at the moment ahead of us, at least, it is by its registered constitution both independent and permanent in nature. Its constitution is such that it has status as a registered charity with applicable stringent compliant obligations cast upon members and directors. This factor holds great attraction for donors of large, valuable collections of qualifying heritage material. It's also been an important matter for our strategic community and club partners, and for our 7 outstanding ambassadors, a couple of whom are present today virtually, and I welcome them. So it's an independent foundation created for the long distance future, set up for permanence and accessibility for all its supporters across Australia and internationally. And we have some of those. We have particularly 3 eminent correspondents globally now, based in Paris, Singapore and Mumbai, respectively. And in a first for Australia, it is dedicated to online service from a tailored database of unique motor-related collections. There are now more than 4,500 books, 14,000 magazines, thousands of other items of primary source materials at our home base, and more are kept elsewhere. And there's the very special Graham Howard collection in-house now. And these are all curated by our very dedicated and generous volunteers, some of whom again are present today virtually. And I welcome them too. We're a member of AMAGA, AMAGA, at the suggestion of Anne Carew at RMIT, and that's working well for us. You see the materials we've been collecting. That's a photograph taken about 5 or 6 years ago of part of my collection in a specially built room at my house, since demolished. It's got a lot of stuff. It's also a hub for clubs, available to supporting enthusiasts and clubs for committee work, for research, for seminars, online presentations, gatherings of cars and bikes. Emphatically, it is not a museum in the traditional sense, although it's called a museum, purposes of charity, charitable work. It's not a shed, men's shed. It's not a clubhouse in the sense of the usual way, but it is a research and education facility in essence. One popular offering we have is the secure custody and permanent location for a club's regulatory stuff, and maybe its library too, subject to space. Regulatory stuff such as the registered office and a home for the main statutory records of the supporting clubs that wish to suggest they can put their stuff with us. Our online policy is backed up by superior internet connections. Our main database is in the making. It's a major thing. It'll be cloud-based. We've got superb connections, and we are building an awful lot of capacity into it, and we're setting up a proper access capacity so that we can flex and move in accordance with demand to provide research materials and information from all levels of depth, if you like, from the very simple right down to the deep and meaningful. When the lockdowns are done and over, we do expect to be working at the building at least 4 days each week. That's not a big task. We have the people wanting to do it. So moving right along, that's the way that the material has been organised just now. You can see the compactness in place. You can see the way the materials have been stacked in good shelving on a floor plan, which I'll demonstrate in a moment. Opportunity comes to the prepared mind. Henry Kissinger said that. I admired it at the time. I was doing my finals in law, and he was right. There were 6 of us forming the first bunch of heroes, if you like. You may recognise a few of the faces. Peter Robinson, bottom left. Andrew Moore, the author, in the white shirt. Terry Thompson, President of the Council of Motor Clubs New South Wales and the ACMA, standing tall at the rear. In the black shirt, John O'Farrell, our careful accountant treasurer. He's holding on the shoulder Brian Caldersmith, an expert in terms of clubs, in terms of history of motorsport, motoring generally, and a superb illustrator. And then on the right, not photoshopped, is me. And they wanted me to be the chairman, and I have been so for, well, nearly all the time since. They've got their own reasons for that. So this group of 6 founded the group, brought collective thinking to the table about our observations of institutions, both in Australia and elsewhere. We travelled a lot. We listed the obvious limitations. We searched for the known unknowns about the future of our heritage, but we landed on the name. We wanted a heritage foundation. We put in the seed capital, and a self-funded group visited Bathurst over 3 days early in 2016. That was top of our list at that time. We had a careful schedule over 3 days to talk with the owner and operator of that fabled Mount Panorama circuit, the custodians of the Museum of Motorsport, which happened to be the local council, and the academics at the Charles Sturt University, focused on their tourism and history people, and then local consultant economists, and the Ancient and Honourable Light Car Club, and a local media man. We learned a lot about Bathurst. By the time we left, after 3 days, we collectively knew that it was not for us, and that the only home for us must be at or near Sydney Motorsport Park. The reasoning was not difficult for us then. It was unique to our circumstances, and it cannot apply always or universally to everybody, but it was for us. By that time also, I'd had discussions with an academic educator, my late sister, Dr. Robin Lonergan. She'd toured widely, including North Korea, in the USA and Asia, and spent time on secondment in Beijing, about 3 years, assisting in admin and academic work at a privately funded senior school. In other words, she was a teacher of teachers. Her suggestions to me were significant, and then she drew up for us a schematic which became a basis for our presentations from that time forward. We call this the spider diagram for the obvious reasons. It was included in our presentations to, for example, the New South Wales State Government in late 2016, and then to the Chief Executive and the President of the ARDC. Excellent people who were hospitable from the beginning. By this visual, we were able to focus the mind of our audience and of ourselves on our wide purpose and on our insistence that the foundation must be both permanent and independent. It must serve the society in a broad way, having social cohesion as one purpose. It must teach but not preach. It must be apolitical and attractive to join and to support. It must find, collect, select and protect the heritage items that we wanted to have on board, never allowing them to be out of our possession. And above all, we must be online in order to be accessible and attractive. This thinking can assist us, has assisted us, to attract adherents, volunteers and funds. It can be attractive, and in fact is attractive, to younger enthusiasts, and not only in our motoring world. It underlies our business plan, which is a good one and is revised frequently. We must have succession planning in mind, meaning that we have to be flexible in seeking our new aspiring directors and executive people. And we have to be generous as a group with our time and our ideas and our personal funds within limits, certainly at the outset. The outset hasn't really finished, but it's getting just about close. It's nearly there. There are no new lessons in this, not for us, probably not for you, but it all makes sense. And our group had to run it up the flagpole and salute it each time that we met. I guess the chairman saw to that. When we structured and established our corporate identity in November 2016, we had prepared our minds on this basis. And we talked the talk consistently over the following years with good effect. And each new director is given the drill. We've still got that spider diagram in our minds, and our patrons and volunteers and supporters are coming to assist us in line with the objectives which we adopted 5 years ago. The next little homily. Well, obviously, that's something we've seen elsewhere, but it's particularly appropriate for us. So we're asked, how can we grow and how can we control this? Our foundation's been set up to perpetuate 6 essential features in its structure. Firstly, it's tightly controlled by reputable, capable people having together all the skills that are necessary to qualify for and continue to hold the status of a registered charity under statute. Second, it is not and cannot be owned or controlled by our government or by any statutory authority, or for that matter by any sponsor or financier in our private sector. Thirdly, it is obligated to have an independent auditor and to remain compliant year on year with the special statutory obligations applying to all not-for-profit tax-free corporates that qualify for charitable status. This imposes additional costs and restraints that our directors all recognise. Fourthly, only the members of the company, and there are only 10, can be directors or other office bearers. This will ensure accountability and good governance, and this factor is expected by all our supporters and partners. It's attractive to them. Fifthly, management should be appointed at one remove from the directors. Our head curator and our chief operating officer are not directors, but are accountable to them. And then lastly, sixthly, the foundation must be and remain attractive, accountable and responsive to all dealing with it, and must deeply respect all laws in protecting copyright and trusteeship. So we've started with excellent internet connectivity, strong rules around security, because these are fundamental tools needed if we are to maintain good governance and our attractive, responsive character. Showing some volunteers at work. Happy people all. There is, in fact, one lady, and she's not here. We don't have a photograph of her, regrettably. We've recruited excellent enthusiasts who work hard with the initial 6 of us. An enjoyable, neat and safe work environment, centrally placed, and a home with 2 refrigerators and a plentiful supply of snack food. Also, we're forward-leaning and looking to see the future trends affecting research, education, and improvement in social cohesion generally. We do not look back to the past in order to preach about the virtues of times gone by, but we have access to excellent heritage material and expertise that we can employ to research, then teach how to use the past to the advantage of anyone who inquires, particularly our clubs and enthusiast supporters. Now, sorting the material and making it accessible. You see there a floor plan, bottom right. The larger element is the ground floor. The top element is on the top. On the right-hand side is on the top. 250 square metres approximately of, if you like, lettable floor space. It was the old admin centre. The whole of the bottom floor is given over to storage because that's on a strong concrete slab. It can take the weight of the books and the compactors. And the top floor is given over to admin, our own admin, a minimum of storage. And the big room is our work room, research room, meeting room. There's a little kitchen off to the side, a second kitchen. There's a bigger one downstairs, and the balcony, which, while it can't hold a crowd, certainly is a good place for, I don't know, a visiting band that one of our volunteers has said he'll get together. Band, I'm not sure, but it'll be something good for coffee and cars. But also it overlooks the main straight of the motorsport park. And of course, the noise of the beautiful Porsches and all the rest go on now and then to entertain us all, and we tend to ignore them as we work. So you can see the way in which we've installed. This is early days, actually. This is 6-8 months ago when we had installed demountable shelving, which is still used, but it's going to have to be replaced. And we brought in many boxes, good storage boxes, hundreds of them, in a big blue truck. And then the photographs and such, which are being coordinated by Brian and others. And that's just a small part. We're not showing, for example, any of the brochures or other primary materials that we do have. Our method on the ground can be summed up as detect and collect and select and protect. That sounds trite, but it's nice in respect to our heritage materials and to our volunteers. And both materials and the people have to be located, often with difficulty, then brought into the sunlight, selected as appropriate and protected. And we're doing all of that. As to our people, we have a structure and a leadership which should reward their sacrifice of time with good, productive and enjoyable work in safe, accessible premises, a good degree of predictability and honesty on the part of the leadership group, is there and is treasured, I think. This is the only way to attract good succession among the next generation of volunteers, be they researchers, docents, writers, librarians, administrators, publicists, or whatever. We seem to be succeeding in that. People like us, they want to join us, and we are on our toes to keep that way, even with COVID in place. As to our materials, we've already learned much from the experts. Here I tip my hat to the RMIT School of Design, who entertained us for a morning, Harriet and Anne Carew and her team. And I think that includes the irrepressible Dr. Norm Darwin. Also Richard Falazza, the talented head of design at General Motors Holdens, as was, and his prominent colleagues Phil Zmood and Paul Beringer, great contributors still, and still wanting to be deeply involved. And then to a man that you may not have heard of, Gerhard Heidbrink, the director of the massive archive at the Holy Halls of Daimler-Benz Classic near Stuttgart, who 5-6 years ago showed us on site how to preserve and access the 15 kilometres of company historical materials under their care out there. A most friendly gentleman who's informed us well. And we have many supporters as a consequence, I think. Supporters and donors, but lockdown is a drag, of course. All of these wish us well and promise their help, and I think we're learning the lessons. So why do all of this? Why in our Sydney Centre, in the rising Indo-Pacific region? What is our conception of the motor heritage of all nations that we are putting to you? Some personal background might give perspective. I'll come to that. I think most of you will relate to it. What is heritage? What's our notion of it? And by the way, my use of the word heritage must not lead us to trouble with semantics. To me, there is a collective memory of the prominent features of learnings that we care about, but all are different and related to individual experiences. The collective is sensed and then discerned when we come together, often in discussion, sometimes by display or assertions, such as we have today, very usefully in shared documents, oral records, such as books and journalism, academic papers, sale brochures, periodicals and reviews. They're all relevant. The permanent record made accessible is vital to ascertaining heritage. Now, heritage is an adjective applied today mostly when valuing jewellery or knickknacks or real estate. To me, though, it's an important noun which applies to the intangible virtue of the collective of historical items, written and oral records, photos and video material to be obtained and protected. So permanent collections of literature, preferably of primary source materials, will be essential to discerning and preserving motor heritage, which should be gathered in, organised and made accessible. That Holderness Motorist Guide, by the way, fascinating stuff, 1915. All the motor cars registered in New South Wales as of January 1915, 31,000 of them, I think, plus including hire cars and taxis. And again, by registration number, make of vehicle, horsepower, owner and address. Fantastic. One of those funny things that you discover in the country. I discovered that at Orange in New South Wales. And that large leather-bound dealer's manual for the Nash car, 1927, I think it is. Massive, beautifully produced. And it's a real document as to how a motor car of quality was manufactured in the late 20s in USA. Beautifully interesting, beautifully illustrated. Stuff that you need to find and keep. Heritage brochures. Now, what's a heritage brochure? I'm still collecting them today. But these, I started collecting this stuff in 1954 when I was at school. I was 10 years old and I was fascinated by motor cars. My father had driven that and I was in the country in regional New South Wales, and I was able to keep and maintain these because of the help of my mother, actually, who didn't understand what I was doing but knew it was precious, and that made good for me. Memories are made of these things if you can locate, touch and feel them. all of us, we are only 2, 3, 4 handshakes distant, you know, from eminent points and persons alive 150 years ago who feature in our shared history. Also very recent to us, heritage people, and I'm not far off 80 years of age, but not necessarily to our children, nor to our colleagues in different domains, nor to those who are elected or authorised to regulate our preservation and use of the nice motor vehicles that our society has engineered and used in past times. To me, that can be a bit of a worry. This worry of mine is not retrograde, not mere sentiment, but is a concern growing from the observed fact that our Australia, still youthful, quite multicultural, and increasingly focused on the now, mostly forgets the base for which it has sprung so recently. We're learning that every day, again. This can be hurtful to the social cohesion that a shared interest in literature, hobbies, sports will foster. In the case of our splendid historic motor cars, bikes, vehicles of all types, we will all benefit from a source of inspiration about the heritage and not of the monetary value type that surrounds them. So now we at Eastern Creek are preserving the heritage of the internal combustion engine, or ICE, as well as other motors. In fact, now we're moving with the times. The ICE motor enabled the development of our spread out nation over the whole course of the last century. We can do that, the preservation, using the great freedoms and technologies we now have. It is fantastic what IT can do for you. And I say that as a child of the early 1950s, where I learned to write on a slate with a piece of chalk and a wet rag. So now we preserve the heritage by gathering in the scattered collections, organising the records, then making it all accessible for research, for displays and education, for informed discussion, the better pursuit of leisure, good human relationships in the clubs, in academia. We have the Western Sydney University as a strategic partner. And in the big sporting arenas like Sydney Motorsport Park, we were so lucky. Fate took a hand, and we have a magnificent site at the demographic centre there, right on the centre of activity for automotive sport, but also automotive interest in Sydney. And across our Indo-Pacific region, in the world linked now by internet, wherever there's a history of motor cars in use, we can do it with our friends, and we have links that are exploring that. I've already mentioned we are with 3 important, eminent global correspondents contributing well. This is a gathering of the Council of Motor Clubs at Sydney Motorsport Park, a typical gathering, usually held each August, put off last year and again this year. I wanted to put it up, not for any reason other than to show the interest of clubs at our centre. They're not all visiting the CM, visiting our building, but not by no means, but they're all potentially that. I've got to say, I am one of those educated in the British tradition. Many share that ballast of my generation. It means I have preserved a knowledge and a regard for a lot of the artefacts and good literature, the documents of record, all of it less than 140 years old, just 2 generations, just 2 handshakes for me. My grandfather, a Londoner born in 1890, who volunteered in 1915 for the Royal Naval Air Service, shook hands with Sir John Jellicoe and Admiral Jackie Fisher, admirals of the fleet, who ruled the waves at the time when Australia was still effectively an assembly of quite small, noisy colonies. When Australia's first automobiles were on the docks at Brisbane, Melbourne and at Sydney, my grandfather had experienced his first ride in a car as a teenager. He liked cars. I was born in 1944 and I recall him well. We have his wartime photos and diaries. His ships visited Sydney twice in 1917, second time he found his wife. And we have written his life story too. That was an exciting educational journey for me and my sisters. We are making opportunities now on an organised platform, thanks. That's Peter Robinson interviewing Spencer Martin this year, and I'm forgetting, it was not long ago, 2021, yeah, at an event organised by the HSRCA and by us and hosted at the ARDC. Immensely popular and really well done. We're making opportunities now like this on an organised platform to hear and learn from our senior and experienced ambassadors and club friends. Spencer is an ambassador of ours. He's also patron of the HSRCA and a very good man and a great author, along with the helpful Mr. Robinson. Oral history is so very important now. Frankly, I love the written word. I have a lawyer's respect for the organised written record. I find the motor car and the aeroplane alike to be fascinating as agents for massive change and social advancement. In my comparatively short lifetime, that's happened, hasn't it? I've lived longer than the car and the aeroplane have been influential, hugely influential, since say 1910 in this country of ours. Oral records and the multitude of opportunities come to us from the clubs who work mainly at the moment with Brian Caldersmith, and there will be others of our volunteer group. So here in Sydney, where Brian and I and our foundation colleagues happen to live, we've ridden our luck, we've preserved the big core collection, we've gathered in some other great collections as well, and what you have suddenly now is an Australian asset in its own home with an international outlook, permanent and accessible online with a long-term future, understood to be unique and useful. I call it an overnight success that has been 10 years in the making. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh.
Well done.
Can you hear me, Hugh? Hello.
Yeah,
hello, Hugh. Can you hear me?
Who's that?
It's Simon, Hugh.
Oh, Simon, yes, yes.
Great, great. Well, this is how we're going to interact because you can't hear me on the screen. So I thought
I can't. Yeah. Okay, good. You better relay the question, Simon.
Exactly. So we went pretty much just on the half an hour then, but
yeah.
Is there anyone who's got any questions for Hugh? I'd just like to say thank you. I thought we'd just let you run for one reason because you couldn't hear me, but two because I think the flow was pretty important for us to understand I suppose the progress of the organisation. So this is Andrew Grant.
I just wanted to say to you that's a very impressive building. How was that funded and designed? What kind of process went into sourcing the funding for it and designing it in a purpose-built way?
Andrew, that's a question which you could ask your colleague of times gone by, Ian Debenham.
Yes.
You may remember him from the Powerhouse.
Oh, absolutely.
It is a building that I should not mention how it's been passed to us, but it's a long-term sublease, which is offset or essentially costing us nothing, put it that way. We are wanted at the Sydney Motorsport Park, and we didn't find this out until about 2 years ago, 18 months. We are wanted there for reasons to do with planning their own future under the guidance, if you like, guidance of the politicians in the state government. Bear in mind, the Sydney Motorsport Park occupies a very large slab, nearly 100 hectares of parkland in the Western Sydney parklands, which is an important big slice of green in the middle of the demographic centre of Sydney on transport routes and so on. The state government and two particular ministers needed to see that this was no longer just a gathering ground for what you might call the elite few or the petrol heads or whatever, but that it had a larger, wider, more saleable and scalable educational and research purpose. We have served that purpose in part, and as and when the next stage of the Sydney Motorsport Park development occurs, and it's underway now, it's in planning. It's a new building, It's near the grandstand. It's a centre of excellence by some means, but it's certainly an admin centre. We know as a foundation that we are going to have a central part physically in that space, no less than what we've got now. The building today is an older building. It's approximately 30 years old. It was not expensively built. We don't want to destroy the internal walls. They're quite convenient, and it suits our purposes. And it's meant, amongst other things, because its capacity is limited, it's meant that we can say to people who want to dump stuff there, no, we haven't got room. And that's worked for us. It's accommodating at the moment all the stuff that we wanted to put there first. It's giving us room to sort it properly. And as to funding, that's a matter for the members. As a charity, we can subsist only on gifts, and gifts of things that we can sell. We're selling off surplus books right now. We've got an eBay shop site, so on. But the funding is something we, the directors, have to organise. We have something like 28, 30 volunteers, all keen, all involved, and we have a growing audience of people who wish to join us. Sorry to be so long, but that's that.
Andrew Moore is on the call. He presented a few years ago, and he's also obviously associated with the group, and it was great to see him in the presentation. Brian Caldersmith.
It's all right. I was just going to give an answer to the question, which was that it was the original ARDC office building.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Hugh. And I must say, there has been correspondence between the AHA and this group, who is now almost entirely on my screen, which is great. And I think it's a terrific thing that we're able to do this today, because it shows that there's a building relationship here, and we're really committed to continuing the conversations and actions that are going on. Great that you came down and checked out the RMIT Design Archives with Harriet and Anne and others, and all of the other connections between Norm and Paul and Richard and others connected. So